How many times have you felt surrounded by negative energies, ruinous words, and spiritual influences that seem to sugarcoat your peace? Sometimes, it seems that no matter how hard we try to move forward, something invisible tries to pull us back. But what if I told you that there is a powerful way to free yourself from this? That there is a prayer capable of transforming the environment around you and strengthening your connection with God. Psalm 18 is not only a beautiful text from the Bible, but a spiritual weapon that David used in times of war, and that you can use today to win your own battles. Many people live trapped in fear, discouragement, and the words of defeat that they hear daily. But the truth is that God created us to live in victory, and prayer is the way to do this. In this study, you will learn how this powerful prayer can bring freedom and open paths to victories that you may not even imagine. And the best part, in just 7 days of commitment, you will be able to feel the transformation happening in your life. If you desire protection, spiritual growth, and a purpose in life aligned with God's will, get ready. Today begins a journey of faith that can change everything. Are you ready to discover how this prayer can be the key to your deliverance? Psalm 18 is born from David's cry in a moment of deep anguish. Surrounded by enemies, persecuted by those who wanted his downfall, he raised his prayer to the heavens, trusting that God would deliver him from the adversary's snare. How many times in our own journey have we felt this way? Situations surround us, negative words hit us, and darkness seems to want to take over. But David teaches us something precious. Genuine spirituality is born from unshakable trust in God's action. He did not look at his specifications, but at the greatness of the Lord, and that changed everything. Prayer has a power that goes beyond what the natural eyes can see. When David cried out, the heavens moved, and God came to his rescue. This shows us that our connection with God is not a distant theory, but a tangible reality. Prayer is not just a habit, but a tool for transformation. If you feel the weight of difficulties today, follow the example of the psalmist. Instead of giving in to despair, raise your faith. Proclaim God's promises over your life, because he hears every plea and acts on behalf of those who include him. Many believe that deliverance only comes with time, but the truth is that God grows old the moment we cry out sincerely. Just like a loving father who runs to help his child, the Lord bends down to hear our prayer. Psalm 18 is a reminder that we are not alone and that no opposing force can prevail against those who are under divine protection. Now, the big question is, how can we apply this in our daily lives? How can we strengthen this faith to see God acting even when everything seems contrary? Reading Psalm 18 reveals to us the absolute power of God over all adversity. David not only cries out for deliverance, but also proclaims the sovereignty of the Lord, who thunders in the heavens and shakes the earth on behalf of those who trust in him. These words are not just poetry. They are statements of a profound spiritual truth. When God arises, no opposing force can withstand him. Just as a warrior equips himself for battle, the believer must clothe himself with faith, for victory comes not by human strength, but by divine action. If we look closely, each verse of this psalm reflects a promise. God not only listens, but he answers. He not only sees, but he ages. And this is the essence of faith, believing that even when we cannot see with our physical eyes, the spiritual world is in motion. Imagine a farmer planting his seed. He does not see the harvest right away, but he knows that beneath the ground, an invisible process is taking place. In the same way, our prayer activates miracles that, in due time, will become visible. Perhaps you have noticed that, ultimately, things seem more difficult than they should be. Unexplained fatigue, worries that arise out of nowhere, constant challenges, and even though you try to maintain your faith, you feel that there is something trying to weaken you. The good news is that we can strengthen our spiritual life and learn to keep our peace, our faith, and our family protected. Imagine waking up every day with peace in your heart, knowing that your life is protected and strengthened spiritually. Imagine no longer feeling the weight of envy, negative words, and difficulties that imprison you. We present the ebook, Spiritual Shielding, Defense Against Evil Energies and Intentions, a complete and transformative guide that will teach you to identify and defend yourself from spiritual attacks, protecting your life, your family, and your home against any negative influence. This book was written for people who want to stop suffering in silence and want to blind their faith, once and for all, removing the weight of envy, negative words, and evil spiritual forces. If you want peace, strength, and true spiritual protection, this ebook is for you. Then click on the link in the first comment, and for a symbolic value, you can transform and protect yourself and your family. Amen. Continuing, the power of God described in Psalm 18 invites us to reflect. Have we truly trusted in Him, or have we allowed situations to define us? The prayer in this psalm is not just a request for help, but a declaration of trust. As we meditate on these words, we can feel this certainty grow within us. No matter how big a storm is, if God is our refuge, we will never be shaken. But how can we maintain this certainty in our daily lives? How can we strengthen our connection with God so that this faith becomes unshakable? The main prayer that accompanies this psalm is a cry for deliverance and victories, an acknowledgement that God is always satisfied, even when we don't realize it. How many times have we felt surrounded by problems, doubts, or even spiritual attacks? Just like David, who was persecuted and betrayed, he also reported moments when it seemed like everything was conspiring against us. However, faith teaches us that God is never far away. He is always working, strengthening our soul, opening paths, and pushing away that which tries to bring us down.
Spiritual deliverance is not just a distant promise, but a reality accessible to all who believe. Jesus taught us that when we seek God with all our heart, He manifests Himself. And this search begins in prayer, the moment we surrender completely before the Father. Just as someone who finds safe shelter in the midst of a storm, God's presence surrounds us and protects us from all evil. Those who place their trust in Him will never be put to shame, because He transforms struggles into testimonies and pain into spiritual growth. However, it is important to remember that often before a great victory, we face spiritual challenges. The enemy tries to weaken us, plant doubts, and distance us from the purpose of life that God has for us. But it is precisely in these moments that we must remain firm, because victory is near. David prayed and saw God's answer. What about us? Are we persevering in faith, declaring the Lord's promises and strengthening our connection with Him? How can we cultivate this constancy so that nothing can divert us from the path? The spiritual challenges that arise before a great challenge is overcome are real, and the Bible is full of examples that show us this. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers before becoming governor of Egypt. Moses opposed the opposition before freeing the people. Even Jesus passed through the desert before beginning His ministry. This teaches us that when we are close to a great victory, the enemy tries to discourage us. But it is exactly at this moment that we must persevere in prayer, trusting that God is preparing something greater than we can imagine. The Christian journey is not without struggles, but each obstacle has a purpose. When we face negative words, envy, or spiritual positions, we need to remember that our strength does not come from ourselves, but from God. Psalm 18 shows us this clearly. It is the Lord who strengthens us, who delivers us, and who leads us safely. Instead of fearing battles, we should see them as signs that something great is about to happen. Gold only becomes pure after passing through the fire, and our faith is also refined in difficult times. In the face of these events, daily prayer becomes essential. Persevering in faith means talking to God every day, meditating on His Word, and keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus. Often, when we try to achieve a victory, we feel spiritually tired and want to give up. But it is at this moment that we must get up, declare that we are more than conquerors, and remain firm in the purpose of life that the Lord has given us. And how can we strengthen this spiritual discipline so as not to lose heart along the way? The purpose of 7 days of prayer is an invitation to strengthen our connection with God and open paths to new victories. It is not an empty ritual, but a spiritual commitment that teaches us perseverance. Jesus showed us the importance of constancy in prayer when He said, "Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you." Matthew 7 verse 7. Just as an athlete trains every day to achieve their best performance, spiritual life also requires discipline. The more we seek God, the more we experience His presence and power in our lives. By dedicating 7 days to this practice, something profound happens. Our hearts align with God's will. Distractions begin to lose their strength, and our faith grows stronger. Imagine someone who plants a seed and cares for it daily, watering it, protecting it, and patiently waiting for it to grow. This is also true of our spiritual journey. Daily prayer allows us to grow in faith, open our eyes to perceive God's answers, and receive strength to continue moving forward. It is not just about asking, but about developing intimacy with the Father. This purpose also teaches us that prayer is not a solitary experience. When we share our concerns, we witness miracles happening not only in our lives, but in the lives of those around us. Psalm 18 reminds us that God has grown old for those who call out to Him with sincerity. So, why not start this purpose today? How about committing to seek God with all your heart and see what He can do in just 7 days? The power of prayer lies not only in the words, but in the faith with which they are spoken. When David cried out in Psalm 18, he was not just reciting verses. He was pouring out his soul before God, believing that His answer would come. In the same way, prayer needs to be a living part of our daily lives, a sincere dialogue with the Father. What happens when a child talks to his earthly father every day? Intimacy grows, trust is strengthened, and the connection becomes unbreakable. The same is true with God. The closer we get to Him, the more we feel His presence stirring within us. Many believe that for God to answer, it is necessary to use beautiful words or specific formulas. But the truth is that He looks at the heart. Prayer can be said out loud or silently, on your knees or standing, in your room or at work. What matters is sincerity and consistency. Jesus showed us this when He taught us the Lord's Prayer, a simple but meaningful prayer. If you want to feel closer to God, start cultivating this daily habit today, setting aside a moment each day to talk to Him. Open your soul and place your concerns in His hands. Over time, this practice will not only bring answers to your prayers, but it will also transform who you are. The peace that surpasses all understanding should take hold of your heart. Situations that were once desperate will be seen with eyes of faith. Your spiritual life will become more solid, and fear will give way to trust in God. But how can you maintain this constancy and prevent the distractions of everyday life from stealing this sacred moment? One of the most effective ways to maintain an active prayer life is to create an environment that favors spirituality. Just as a plant needs fertile soil, light, and water to grow, our faith needs elements that strengthen it. And this involves both our time alone with God and the influences we choose to surround ourselves with. If we feed our minds with words of faith, praises, and edifying testimonies, our connection with God becomes stronger. But if we surround ourselves only with pessimism and distractions, our spiritual life will soon weaken. The Bible teaches us to refresh our minds daily, Romans 12 verse 2. This means that our spiritual life does not grow by chance, but by choice. If we want a deep relationship with God, we need to decide to prioritize Him in our routine. This could mean waking up a little earlier to pray, replacing a few minutes of social media with a moment of Christian reflection, or even creating a prayer journal to record requests and answers. Small habits build a solid life of faith. The important thing to remember is that God is always waiting for us. No matter how distant someone may feel, there is always a way back. Just like a loving father who anxiously awaits the return of his child, God longs for this connection with each of us. And now, after everything you have learned, the question that remains is, are you willing to take this step and make prayer an unshakable pillar of your life? Now that you know the power of this prayer, the big question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Are you just going to listen and let the worries of everyday life extinguish this flame? Or are you going to act with faith and experience this transformation in your life? God calls us to a deep relationship with Him, and prayer is the way to do this. Psalm 18 teaches us that when we cry out sincerely, the heavens move in our favor. So why not start now? Imagine what your life would be like if you cultivated this daily habit of prayer, strengthening your faith and living under God's protection. Challenges will come, but nothing can knock down those who stand firm in the Lord. Are you willing to take this step and trust that God has something powerful in store for you? Write your prayer interest in the comments and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Just as David found deliverance, you too can experience God's action. If this word touched your heart, don't put it off. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and continue learning more about how to strengthen your spirituality and your connection with God. This journey of faith is just beginning, and God has much more to reveal to you. Are you ready to experience this transformation?